Welcome back to Feeling Seen, the podcast about the movies that make us feel seen. My co-host today has had a long career as an independent producer, director, and writer. She's worked on the docuseries Uprooted and Keep This Between Us, and the movie Gin, which won a special jury prize when it premiered at South by Southwest. Now she's sharing her filmmaking wisdom on a podcast called Distribution Advocates Presents. Avril had a hard time pinpointing a character in film and television that she really identified with. And after some soul searching, she landed on Issa Rae's Awkward Black Girl, the web series that would go on to become Insecure on HBO. We'll get into that character and why she chose Issa's web series version over the Insecure iteration, as well as lots of insights on staying motivated as an independent creator. Let's get into it. Avril Speaks. What else do the people need to know about you before we get started today? Feel free to throw in film independent or Sundance accolades you have. Please do.
Yes, I'm a Sundance Momentum Fellow. I am a Film Independent Amplifier Fellow. Just recently, I do a lot of work with Film Independent and Global Media Makers, which is a really cool program. I get to meet filmmakers from all over the world.
That's awesome.
And which is, something that I'm always really excited about. And I also play the drums. People should know that about me too.
Do you just have a set in your home? Are you a part of a band? How far and wide did the drums reach?
Honestly, it's something I just started taking lessons a year ago. So I'm a very amateur drummer, but it's something that I've always wanted to do. And I just never did it. And then, you start to get older. I've wanted to do it since I was a kid, and then I never did it. And then I got older and it's oh, you're too old to do that. And then one day I was like, I'm just going to do it. And I signed up for lessons. And so it's been a year now. So it's I'm obsessed.
Well, now you've been in the arts for a very long time now. You're only recently folding drumming in, but I saw it looks like your filmmaking dates back to at least the early 2000s, and maybe you were kicking around before that, even in the late 90s. I don't know.
I was. Yeah, it actually started in the mid to late 90s is when it started. Right. It's so funny because someone, you talk about the Distribution Advocates podcast, someone had made a comment on our Distribution Advocates page about the podcast. And they were like, this is great. And they were like, this reminds me of an organization back in the day that was in New York called AIBF. Uh-huh. And I was like, oh my God, I used to work for AIBF in the 90s.
Damn. I mean, she was exactly right. And I admire your consistency decades on.
Right. I mean, that's what was really amazing about it was that it brought back to my remembrance, oh my God, I have been doing this a long time. And I was working for that organization, I think it was the late 90s, early 2000s. And it was an organization that so defined sort of my ethos as a filmmaker. And it wasn't until that comment that I was like, oh yeah, do that.
That's somebody doing journalism on you, finding the connective tissue in the through line of your work. Tell me about the title of that. Distribution Advocates. Tell me about the pod. What are you guys talking about?
Yeah, we're talking about distribution. So just to give a little background about Distribution Advocates, it's essentially a group of producers who just came together during the pandemic. And, when everything was shut down, nobody knew how we were going to make movies again. People were just having conversations about what is the industry going to look like moving forward? And we got on this call to talk about that. But then the conversation just kind of veered into everything that's wrong with distribution today.
Right.
And we just kept having these conversations, and it kind of morphed into this collective of producers who were just trying to be advocates for filmmakers who were trying to navigate the distribution space. And we started doing workshops. We started doing what we called teach-ins. So we were partnering with different organizations and just trying to give some tips and pointers on this is what you should think about, and kind of start a conversation about distribution. And we were getting them so much, so many requests for those teach-ins. It just started to be a lot. And so we're like, you know what, why don't we just do a podcast? And that way we can cover the education element of it and kind of put the information out there, and it can live on the podcast. But hopefully we can have a larger conversation about, what is wrong with distribution and, have conversations about like, how do we move forward and how do we envision a new path, a new way for filmmakers. So, we're upfront that we don't necessarily have the answers to those questions, but we definitely feel like the conversation, it's a necessary conversation, especially where we are today.
Mm-hmm. Well, that, I think, I really like how we'll go with the primary character pick, but that's going to feed into something else. I like how that fits in with your primary character pick, which you brought to us was Issa Rae, and I think it seems like specifically anchored to the earlier iteration of Insecure, which was the sort of origin story product of that, which was the Awkward Black Girl web series that she did.
Let me introduce myself. My name is Jay, and I'm awkward and black. Someone once told me those were the two worst things anyone could be. That someone was right. Where do I start? 3 months ago, I shaved my head. My boyfriend, D, the only guy I've ever loved, had just broken up with me.
You know what? I can't do this no more. I can't. I'm not happy. I'm uncomfortable. I don't even think you're happy. I gotta go. I just gotta go.
So I needed a fresh start. And to me, a fresh start meant crying in the mirror, cutting all my hair, getting drunk at the company holiday party, and sleeping with this guy, A, my coworker.
What I like about that as a connective tissue is, like, it has that independence to it and that very bootstrapped quality that feels like there was so much possibility around in the 1990s. In this sort of zenith of independent filmmaking, it feels like, at least looking back nostalgically, I was not there, so I could not say, but that's sort of the romantic idea of it, I feel. And then going into the 2010s, we have that spirit combining with self-platforming. YouTube, social media is burgeoning. And like even in an early episode of one of the series, you see like this call for like, hey, go to Kickstarter if you like our show. Because if we don't meet our goal, you're not going to get any more, like we have to stop after this. You're not going to get any more episodes. And now we're talking in 2024 amidst the holy shit, how do we shove the toothpaste back in the tube of what the streaming revolution hath wrought that everybody went all the way the hell in on from a business perspective. So tell me about connecting with Issa's program, An Awkward Black Girl. Was it the early 10s that you were watching this when it was coming out originally?
Yeah. I used to watch it when it came out originally, and I used to sit there and just like, wait for the new the new episodes and the new season. Like it's really interesting that you make that connection in terms of the independent spirit behind it. Because there was something very unique about that show at that time. Still to this day, I always remember that scene. And this was the scene that got me hooked on that show and got me hooked on Issa Rae's character, but then also Issa Rae as a whole. It's that scene. It's a scene where her and the guy, I think it's a guy at her job or a guy that she liked or whatever, they're at a light together. They're like in separate cars, but they're both sitting at a stoplight.
Yeah, like I think that's the very beginning. That's like the first episode.
And it's that whole like, oh, hi, you wave and say hi, and then you get caught at the next light and it's like awkward. Like, what do I say? Do I say hi again and like keep saying hi every time we get to a light?
Get to the fake phone call portion of the awkwardness. Yes,
exactly.
What's the protocol for repeatedly running into someone at a stop sign?
Jay, missed you.
Oh my God! Hey, I totally didn't even see you.
It's been so long.
I know, right? No, seriously, what the fuck is it?
I guess I'll see you at work.
Shit. Are you supposed to acknowledge them every time? And how many fake laughs are acceptable before it becomes too much?
No, I saw you. Like, I know.
Is it rude to do the dramatic slowdown? Or what about the fake phone call? There's only so long I can hold a fake conversation.
No, yeah. Nope. Yeah.
The stop sign. To any ordinary person, it's a simple sign of direction. But for me, it's the epitome of social misdirection. Because I'm awkward.
And it's something that I so identify with. It's like such a universal, I feel like we've all had moments like that, but to see that through a lens of this Black woman, I felt very seen, but it's also a thing of like, I think I did resonate with kind of the way it was done, like that it was like released on this, open platform of YouTube that anybody could access it. And it wasn't, it just didn't feel as gate kept, and gatekeep is not a not a verb, but like it just didn't feel that protected in the sense of like someone is deciding whether or not I can watch this or not. And especially, I want to say that may have been around the time when I either first came to LA or like right before I came to LA. And so it just, even the making of it felt accessible. Like I know of some people who were working on that show. You know what I mean? Like,
oh, okay.
And so it's just like, wow, like I'm sitting on the beach here with this person who's like a writer on this show. It felt accessible. It felt like something that was of us. You know what I mean? And I really appreciated that about the show. And like I said, about the making of it altogether.
No, it's so interesting to go back, like, and obviously, like, Insecure, like, got, Issa Rae got snatched up. Insecure became, like, a very polished, very sexy HBO show. It's, like, even between, like, it's a very polished and sexy HBO show in season 1, but you can even tell between season 1 and season 2 that actors are having glow-ups with, like, the success of the show. And, like, but you watch Awkward Black Girl, and, like, so much of it is done in Issa's voiceovers about her character and what she's feeling and what's going on, and you can hear the, like the plosives in her, like, whatever mic she's recording voiceover into. There is a very homespun quality about that. And obviously, it takes resources to make everything. Like, she says in this Kickstarter plea, like, if you like Awkward Black Girl, then you need to help support us because you're not going to get any more episodes if you don't. But it's fascinating to see. I feel like everything's got to be so fully dialed in now that it's really, like, It's like, it makes me feel nostalgic to see something that was like, but what if she just had a good idea and she was like figuring out the technical stuff and doing the best she could with like the resource that she had along the way? But what if the idea was just good enough?
Yeah. Right. I mean, it was a great show. Like, it was such a great show. And I mean, I loved Insecure as well. But I think I identified with Awkward Black Girl in a different way. It's like I always say... I
was going to ask if there was a difference in connection between the two properties.
I always say, when people ask the question of, like, who do you identify with or whatever, just like in general, I identify with Issa Rae, but I also feel like Issa Rae is like a cooler version of Awkward Black Girl. Like, she's so much cooler than me.
Yeah, she's sincerely very cool.
To be. But it's like Awkward Black Girl, like that specific character on Awkward Black Girl, I felt like was me. Like, I was just like, again, I go back to that awkward interaction at the traffic light. That's just like, I don't know. I was just telling somebody I was at a party last week, like a networking event, and it's like I'm the one that's like standing in the corner with my glass of wine, just like, not, afraid to talk to anybody. So it's like that version of it just felt very, like, it just felt like me. And I think with Insecure, I definitely still related to the character, but it felt like a slicker, cooler version of Awkward Black Girl. And not that that's, a bad thing, but it was just different. No. It was just different. I didn't feel the same, like, you're better than me. Like the Insecure version is like, oh, she's got it a little more together. She's a little bit, she's a little more hip, a little more cool.
And you're like, oh, it's not TV me, it's HBO me.
Right, right.
Yes. It's premium cable add-on me.
Yeah.
Well, was there... When it feels like the sort of aesthetic of watching Awkward Black Girl reminds me, and like mentioning like the independent film possibilities of the 1990s, and with you having been working in film like since the 1990s, it feels like that was a decade where there were opportunities, where there were these blooms in proliferation of representation within media that it felt like the regulating powers that be hadn't figured out how to put the genie back in the bottle yet. So they're like, oh shit, like I guess queer cinema's happening and I guess black cinema's happening. And well, okay, like I guess we're being overtaken by this. And then it feels like 9/11 happened and we had to rally around like boring homo nationalism, and then kind of everything went away, and to where it feels like, I've talked about this on the show before, it feels like the sort of representation and identification conversation that we have now feels like it's almost trying to get back to what felt like it was an easier access point in the 1990s. And I wanted to hear from you as somebody who's been in this for so long, like, where have you felt the greatest points of possibility in terms of like you as a black woman making your art that's just honest to you in communities that are real to you? Is this a time where it's like, I feel like I have more opportunity than ever? Like, you know, the arc of the universe is, you know, long, but it bends towards justice. Or is it like, now the 90s kind of had a thing or two as an edge on this. Like, I wonder about this so much. And I feel like you are a stakeholder who can actually tell me about it. That's
interesting. You know, I do feel like the 90s were an interesting time where, you know, when I think about film and television, and even thinking about representation and this idea of feeling seen, it's like, you know, there's like these internet memes that go around that are like, pick your, you've seen those things on Instagram where it's like one of these has to go, right?
Yeah.
Somebody had one about 90s film, and, you know, they had like all of these black films that were listed, and you're just like, oh my God, like you had Love Jones, you had Brown Sugar, you had The Wood, you had Inkwell, you had like, there were so many.
You had A Low Down Dirty Goddamn Shame, one of my all-time fucking favorites. The Wayans Family Factory, Major Payne, huge movie in my house.
And then on the TV side, you had like Moesha, and, you know, there were just
Hanging with Mr. Cooper,
In the House. There were just a lot of shows that, you know, that we kind of grew up on, that were sort of different representations. And it ran the gamut. Like you would have a Moesha, but then you would also have, like you said, like a Hanging with Mr. Cooper. There was Parenthood with Robert Townsend and Girlfriend. Like, so you got to see these different angles. And then it seemed like in the 2000s, it was just like dry. Like there was like nothing. And then you come to today. What's so interesting to me about today is that, yes, I do think that there are more, you know, that compared to the 2000s, there's more there. But it's also, at the same time, it's also sad. It's like, I remember when Oscar So White came out, you know, the hashtag Oscar So White. And then you go back to like the 90s, and there was a boycott of the Oscars in the 90s because there was no representation. And it's like, how is it that we're still, like, now it's just a form of a hashtag, you know what I'm saying? But it's literally the same fight that, you know, black filmmakers and black actors and actresses were having at that time. So, you know, you kind of go, like, did we advance? Did we stay the same? Did we go backwards in some ways? It's like the fact that there was such a gap, you know, in 2000, it kind of makes it seem like, well, we're doing fine right now because we have look at Insecure, you know. But it's like, you know, especially now, as someone who is, you know, a creator, someone who's out there pitching projects, like, it's still very difficult to see that, you know, to see different representations, like, you know, with for Black and many other ethnic groups too, for LGBT, like, just to see the gamut of stories and of experiences. Like, it's one thing to just say, oh, there's a Black show, you know, but it's like, there's so many stories within the Black community that can be told. And there's still a ways to go in terms of showing the diversity of, you know, the stories, even within a particular group. There's still so many stories to be told. And I still feel like the industry has a very narrow lens on, you know, what a Black story looks like, what an Asian story looks like, you know, fill in the blank. I think that the industry still has a very narrow view of what that is. And you know, we still have some ways to go on that.
What was it about the uniqueness of Awkward Black Girl that got you?
I think with Awkward Black Girl, it was just like so common. Like I didn't,
Yeah.
it was almost kind of, to me, kind of like Seinfeld. You know, people would say Seinfeld was like the show about nothing.
The show about nothing, yeah.
But it was like those everyday experiences. Like that moment in the car with Issa and her coworker reminded me of the scene in, there was like an episode of Seinfeld where he's, it looks like he's picking his nose. Like,
Oh, yeah, yeah. It looks like George is like, yeah.
and he's like, it's not a pick. And he spends the whole episode like, it's not a pick.
Call every day for the past 4 days. She hasn't returned one call.
Was it a scratch? Or a pick?
It was a scratch.
Hey, it's me.
Don't you think I know the difference between a pick and a scratch?
But yeah, it was like one of those shows that is, it's like, you know, these experiences that she has at work or like trying to date or, you know, there were kind of like these everyday things. It wasn't a show about like, this is what it's like to grow up in Compton or like to grow up Black or whatever. But at the same time, it wasn't ignoring her Blackness at all. Like it was just a part of everyday life. But I think for me, it was just the ordinariness of it. It was like everyday life. And I just love those type of like slice of life kind of stories that feel very familiar. And so, you know, and it was also funny, you know, it's just like that like everyday humor of like these everyday interactions. So I think that that's what was a big part of it for me, was what I connected to. It was also just like, I think she did a really great job of, and I think Insecure did this as well, of just like celebrating LA.
Yeah. Oh, that really tugs at my heart.
Yeah. She just did a really good job at like showing these other parts of LA, like out, you know, not Hollywood, not, you know, the things that you would typically see, or the things that LA is quote unquote typically known for. Like it's kind of, we're going to show you this other part of LA. I really appreciate it too. As someone who's not from LA, and like I said, I think I either was about to move to LA when the show was on, or I may have just gotten to LA. So it was just like, oh, this is kind of cool. Like here's some, you know, neighborhoods and places that I should check out, you know. So that was cool too.
So coming, like, before getting to LA, like, that's coming off the 2000s, which is, as we've discussed, a fallow period in many ways. It produced so many things that I love, but is also a barren wasteland in a lot of other ways. What was creation like for you as a filmmaker at that time?
Oh,
Were you like, I am pouring water into an empty fucking well? Or were you like, I'm having my well dried out constantly? Like, I'm giving, and I'm getting nothing back here.
You know, it's interesting. I hit a point during that time where I was just like, I don't know about this. Like, I think I'm going to give this up. I think that was part of my, you know, probably like in the early 2000s, up to like 2010, I was sort of going like, you know, I'm going to keep doing, I was like making shorts and making projects with other people. And I got to a point where I was just like, yeah, I don't know about this. And I think maybe I should think about another path. And so, you know, I was teaching for a while. I was a professor for a while. And I was like, maybe I should just go that route. Because it's like there's the representation part of it, but it's also just like an expensive thing to do. You know, like you mentioned Issa Rae and her Kickstarter campaign. It's like to keep doing this takes money and resources and people. And so you get to a point where it's draining. It's very draining. And I think I had gotten to a point where, you know, just trying to make films just became draining. Also, the strain of trying to reach audiences. I think you alluded to this earlier in terms of Issa Rae, like how she was able to connect to her audience. It's really difficult to do that. And even more so in the 2000s and, you know, in the 90s and the 2000s before the internet sounds so old. Before the internet.
Yeah. I mean, it'd be handing out VHS tapes. That would be your option. Like traveling around with like reels in your trunk or something.
It's so funny. I was going through my computer just the other day and I came across this. So I had a friend, when I was in film school, I remember when I got a high 8 camera and I was like, ooh, I was like, I've arrived. I got a high 8 for Christmas. And, we used to shoot these videos in my basement and we filmed this like variety show. It's like a sketch comedy show and we filmed it. And I found the video on my computer the other day. And I just thought to myself, like, wow, like, and we literally like made copies of it and sold it, like of VHS copies and sold it. And I thought to myself, like, wow, like what if, we were like, this is like ahead of its time, because if we had a YouTube, this totally would have been on YouTube. Right. And, we would have put this on social media, but we just didn't have access to those kinds of things back then. So having access to audiences was just like really difficult. And so like by the time 2000s, the mid 2000s came around, I was just like, I don't know what to do with this thing anymore. I don't.
Yeah. What kept you in it?
Okay. I think I realized that I still have stories to tell. Yeah. Truth be told, I'll tell a story.
Please do.
I went with a friend of mine to, there's AFI has the directing women directors program, whatever. And I had gone with her to an info session. They had an info session and I just went along and I got there and I was like, oh yeah, this actually sounds kind of cool. Maybe I'll apply. And I applied. And as I was doing the application, I started to get really into it. And it was like, oh yeah, this is great. And then I made it to the interview stage. I had an interview and all of that. And I felt really good about it. And I started getting really excited. Yeah. And then I didn't get it. And I was so pissed. I was so pissed. And I had to really examine, like, why are you so angry? Like, for someone who was going to step away from it all, like, what's behind that? And I really had to just think about, like, what am I doing and what do I really want to do? And then I ended up doing a web series. It's like during that, you talk about Issa Rae, it's like during that time, web series were the thing. You know what I mean? Huge. Like everybody was doing web series. And so I was like, well, I'm going to do a web series. I did a web series. And I think that's what made me realize, like, I still have stories I want to tell. So like, let me get back in there.
It's time for a quick break, but I'll be right back with Avril Speaks. Then I'll have one quick thing before I go about movie of the summer, guys. Movie of the year? I don't know. The, I guess, conclusion to A24's Maxine trilogy. Coming to a theater near you this July, Maxine. We will talk about that at the end.
Are you tired of being picked on for only wanting to talk about your cat at parties?
Do you feel as though your friends don't understand the depth of love you have for your guinea pig?
When you look around a room of people, do you wonder if they know sloths only have to eat 1 leaf a month?
Have you ever dumped someone for saying they're just not an animal person?
Us too.
She's Alexis B. Preston.
She's Ella McLeod.
And we host Comfort Creatures, the show where you can't talk about your pets too much, animal trivia is our love language, and dragons are just as real as dinosaurs.
Tune into Comfort Creatures every Thursday on Maximum Fun.
What is up, people of the world? Do you have an argument that you keep having with your friends and you just can't seem to settle it? And you're sitting there arguing about whether it's Star Trek or Star Wars, or you can't decide what is the best nut, or can't agree on what is the best cheese.
Stop doing that. Listen to We Got This with Mark and Hal, only on Max Fun.
Your topics asked and answered objectively, definitively, for all time.
So don't worry, everybody. We got this.
We got this.
How do the producing and directing angles complement one another, or sort of like what does one sharpen for you about the other? Because you've done a lot with both, in both disciplines.
Well, I will say, first of all, that the directing, I think now, doing that now, I have fun with it. Like, you know what I mean? Like, it's not, I try not to, and this goes in general, it's not just with directing, with producing too. I'm just, let's just enjoy what we're doing. And I say this all the time, like, I see this as a gift and like a privilege that we get to do this, like that this is what I get to do for a living. But I think that producing can sometimes be so much, it can be so logistical and so technical and about the logistics that I think having the directing background helps me to always keep the creative at top of mind, and then vice versa. Having a producing background helps me to see directing. I also think that the other thing that producing has helped with is producing has allowed me to take a front row seat at some really great directors. Like I've been very fortunate to work with some really talented directors and to be able to like watch them and watch their process and say like, oh, and especially having done it before and knowing the areas where I struggle, to sit in a seat as a producer and go like, oh, that's a way to handle that. That's like different from, how I was used to handling it, how I've done it before, or how I would even do it. I'm like, that's a better way to do it. Like, I can incorporate that, or like, it's just like giving me different ways to think about doing things. So I've found that to be really interesting. And I'm also just really fascinated that every director is unique. It's like you can put the same script into 5 different directors' hands and come out with 5 different movies,
I have thought so many times about how much I want to see like 450 whatever different countries make Neon Demon. Because that movie is such just like a tabula rasa of like Nicholas Winding Refn, but give that premise to however many different filmmakers from around the world and like to imbue their own sort of cultural relationship with beauty and aesthetic and femininity and like the beauty industrial complex. I love the notion of a challenge like that.
That should happen. I feel like that should be like a competition or something, or like a I don't know. So how they do those like film like a film festival or like a film competition where everybody makes their version of.
Yeah, it's not like, oh yeah, it's the remake of. It's like, no, it's the interpretation of. And like this many filmmakers were given this much money to make their take on. Because like you said, you can put the same damn thing into the hands of so many different directors and you are going to get a different product every time. Exactly.
So yeah, I love that about producing, that, people have different interpretations. And I carry that with me when I'm directing as well. That, just to think like, okay, well, this is my interpretation of whatever it is that I'm working on, to kind of come at it from that. Because it can get really easy to be like, oh, what does this person do? Like, you kind of always, it's like, always like the grass is greener kind of thing. Like you're always looking over there like, what is this doing? But to own what my own voice is.
Well, no, so with that, with like, your voice, like the aligning the logistical and the creative, another character that you brought as a possibility was one from a movie that you have produced. It is the sort of main character we follow in the movie Jin. Her name is Summer, and her mom is like a well-known meteorologist in the Los Angeles like local news. And her mom at the beginning of the movie is converting to Islam. And this girl who's, she's young, she's pretty, she's feeling herself, and she seems like she's deciding whether or not she's gonna dabble in her mom's faith and take it as her own, or like really fully commit to it, and it's coming of age. But through that sort of specific lens and focus, also an LA movie, And you said that Summer was a character that you connected to as well as somebody who was getting this movie made. How did that factor into your connection to the material and your sort of push to make it? Like, was there that identification early on, and was that like a motivating factor for you wanting to get that movie made?
Absolutely. Absolutely. As someone who grew up, I didn't grow up in a Muslim home. I grew up Christian. And I have never identified with a teenager struggling with faith more than I identified with Summer. There was something about like just this idea that she found some things about it that were really beautiful, but other things about it that were really constricting, and found herself at odds with some of it. And then you have this mother who is like being really dogmatic about it, of just like, you need to convert, like in a way that's kind of off-putting. And I think I identified with Summer, and I also identified with the mother as well, because I've been through that in my life too, where I had my own conversion when I was in my I guess I was a young adult, and had my own conversion, and was just very dogmatic about it. And, and in your mind, you're doing the right thing. Like it's like the mom thought she was doing what's best for her daughter. And then, by the end of the movie, she, has to realize that there has to be a give and take with that.
Yeah.
And so I really identified with Jade, with her mother's journey. Like, I identified with her journey, and I think I identified with Summer's character, because I often, as a teenager, would feel like, there are aspects of going to church that I like, but I also want to live my life. It's like Najla Mukmin, who wrote and directed Jinn, always talks about how she wanted, her father was a devout Muslim, and she respected that. But it's like, she would go home and be like, I'm a teenager. I want to dance, and I want to listen to Lil' Kim, and I want to, do this. And that really resonated with me, because I feel like that was a lot of how I felt growing up as a teenager, that I was never able to vocalize. And so this film was just like a great expression of that. And it's something that I wanted to help get it on the screen in whatever way I could.
Well, and in watching Jinn, as I was like going back through episodes of Awkward Black Girl, like these are two, women girl. There are different points in their life. Issa's in her early 20s, and Summer is in her, it seems like mid-teens. But they're both like two characters who are searching. And with Issa in Awkward Black Girl, you have her like, she's at a job she doesn't like. It's a dead-end job. She doesn't want to stay. But like, she can't get herself to leave because it's good enough and she needs the money. And so she's in this like, but what am I doing here? Sort of behind the situational comedy and like the great sort of mundane gags of that series. There's also just like it feels so informed by that like mid-20s sort of what am I doing malaise. And I feel like there's a sort of interesting hazing over of that, like a bit of a jaded adult quality, to where with something like Summer, it's so raw and it's so potent because she's a teenager. And I wondered if like did you sort of align with any of that in the two of those characters, that sort of aspect of searching, as you moved toward a career in filmmaking that requires so much resolve, almost like a delusional level of resolve to stick with and do? Or like, were you of clear purpose early on, or was that something that felt familiar to you as well?
Ooh, that's a good question.
We like to drop the big ones in your lap on this
a
show.
big one.
Just like really wade through it all.
That's a big one. I think I always had some sort of sense of purpose, some sense of like, there's something. And I think for both characters, and I also think for myself, I think, it's like we want to feel like there's some purpose in our lives and like what. So yeah, I think I always felt that, but I think figuring it out had always been an issue for me. Because again, it goes back to the representation and feeling seen. Like I didn't have any examples of how to do it, like of how to be it. You know, it's like I want to be a writer, but I don't know how to be a writer. Like that was, you know what I mean? Like I knew I liked to write and tell stories, probably like, you know, in whatever version of that knowing is. Yeah, I knew that as early as like second grade. Like I knew I loved to write, but like, what does one who likes to write do in life? Like I had no idea. Like, you know what I mean? Like I come from a family and you know, just a world where it's like you look in the newspaper and find a job. So it's like I can't look in a newspaper and find a job for writing. So like, what do I do? So I spent a lot of my, you know, teenage life, young adult life, just going like, well, what does that look like? I mean, even when I got into even when I decided film was it, I still didn't really get like all that there was to do. Like I didn't really understand what a producer did. I think I kind of half understood what a director did. You know, and like that's why I ended up producing so late in life, because like I had no idea what that even was. So I always had this sense that there was going to be. I used to write lists all the time. Like you know, my bedroom used to be. I used to put up like goals and like lists on the wall of like, this is what I want to do. So I always knew that there was something there. But just, I think the understanding what that was and also understanding how to get there and also learning to define like what I was looking for, that didn't come until much later. I mean, it's still happening. I'm still trying to figure some of that out. But like, I think a lot of that didn't come until much later.
Was it the writing that came first then?
Absolutely.
And what did you want to start writing? What was it that you wanted to see that you were starting to make?
Oh my gosh. I started out writing like stories. Like, you know, I always tell the story about, you know, I talked about it like it's like in the first or second grade. My teacher was like, she gave us a piece of paper and was like, write a story about your life or something like that. And I was like, forget that paper. I was like, give me some construction paper. Like I got a construction paper and I had my mother to get out pictures. Like I made a book. It was like chapters. Like, I mean, first grade, like how long is your life? Like you're like 6. Like, but like I wrote this whole thing out and I just like to write worlds and moods. You know what I mean? Like, I think a big thing for me was like moods and emotions, and also just like I said, like borrowing from my own life, you know, specific events that have happened, or even like moods and emotions that were behind a specific event.
What are the prevailing moods and emotions that you find you're imbuing into your work now? What's guiding you?
I think what's guiding me now is mystery. I'm really leaning into this idea of mystery and kind of mystery and curiosity, I would say. I think I've just finally in life embraced the fact that, like, you know, I don't know. Like my best, like it's the beauty of just saying, I have no idea. I don't know. I just did this show that, here's a little plug for Files of the Unexplained. That's,
oh, great.
It premieres on Netflix tomorrow, actually. but it's all about the unknown. And I had such a great time doing that show because, you go into things going like, you can say it's real or it's not real. But we just don't know. Like, we don't know what's out there. And so I think about, you could take it in the literal sense in terms of like the paranormal and things like that. But then the mystery of our day-to-day relationships, like my relationship to my family, and the mystery and the curiosity that's behind that. I'm really fascinated by that type of thing.
And I guess, like, as we come down toward the end, do you feel like having, like, witnessed, like, several phases of the film industry over, like, this 21st century and having a podcast where you talk about, like, distribution and getting independent film out there, how are you guys, how are the advocates, I guess I would say, given that the industry is in such flux, does this feel like a time where another sort of, do we feel like we're still in a time where a sort of roughly hewn, beautiful thing like Awkward Black Girl could get grabbed up and then become insecure? Or has distribution changed such that that's not a model that could necessarily function like it did for Issa Rae? Like, where in terms of what you know about distribution and what you've seen does creation, and because that's the logistical side, where does the creative side of your brain work in harmony, or at least in a forced partnership with the logistics, to be like, this is how I evolved to make those things happen?
Yeah. That's a great question. I feel like we're in a very critical time right now in the industry, especially, post-COVID, post-strike. A lot of people are having that conversation right now in terms of what does the future look like for filmmakers who want to get their work out there to audiences. And I do feel like there are... there are new opportunities that have yet to be explored. I had a call the other day with a friend who had just done a short film, and we were trying to talk through like kind of what are those avenues to distribute her short. And I mean, she was schooling me about, all these platforms like Amaletto and another one, I'm forgetting the other one, Pillist or something. I can't think of it. But these platforms that exist where, I had a meeting while I was at South by with some folks from Kinema, which is another distribution, an online distribution platform. There's all of these platforms that exist that I feel like if we can find some ways to partner with these platforms and use these platforms to engage audiences, and maybe there's some kind of way that we can kind of harken back to those early days, like Awkward Black Girl, and how they were able to galvanize that audience. It's like, now we have these type of platforms that also didn't exist before, like Kinema, like Amaletto. It's finding the balance or finding the missing link to our audience, these platforms, and bringing those together. Those are the conversations. Those are the type of conversations that we're hoping the podcast will help spark. And they are happening. I feel really excited and hopeful that these conversations will yield something. I think that, I'm hearing more of those conversations in the independent space. And I think more and more people are just at that point and where we're just kind of like, we're over it. People are just kind of over the excuse me. People are over the same old, the typical, the status quo, if you will, and want to find those new solutions. So, I don't know. We'll see.
I was going to ask you if you were feeling hopeful or daunted, and I'm glad to hear hopeful, because that feels like a good parting message for people, is the hopeful one. So, Avril, thank you so much for coming on and taking your time with us today, and for, in a tumultuous landscape, sending us with a bow of hope on top of the conversation.
Oh, good. Yeah, I feel like this is like, we have to have hope. Have like, even if it's small, if it's a small kernel.
The thing we can control is our hopefulness about a difficult time.
Exactly. Now, believe me, I know it's hard sometimes. It's hard sometimes to hold on.
You as much as anybody. You as much as you faced down the 2000s and emerged out the other side.
Exactly. And that's our hope. I have to hope that we'll do it again. I mean, I think that enough people are talking about it now, and that in and of itself gives me hope that we're gonna figure something out, and we're gonna move in a new direction some way.
Well, Avril, thank you again for coming and talking with me today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Thank you once again to Avril Speaks. Distribution Advocates Presents is available wherever you find your podcasts. If you want to watch Gin, it is on Tubi and most VOD platforms. You know where to find them. Pick your platform of choice. It's the one from 2018, by the way, not the movie of the same name, from 2014. Gin from 2018, and we will put the links to all of that in the show notes. And now, that one quick thing before I go. Guys, finally got a trailer for Maxine. And if you listen to this show, even semi-regularly, I think you all know where I stand on Mia Goth. I think you all know that I stand for Mia Goth, that I stand in my love of Mia Goth, my love and belief in her. I cannot believe the riches that we got on the run of X-Pearl Infinity Pool that came out within that was like an 18, maybe 12 month run of movies that came out. We were unbelievably, our cup runneth over at the time, but guess what? We knew it wasn't done with Pearl. There was that little teaser of Maxine Gets to Hollywood in the 80s. So we've known this was coming. It is time, this 4th of July weekend, happy Independence Day, we get to go back to the big screen with XXX Maxine. That is Maxine Minx, Mia Goth's character from the movie X. Also, in its way, Mia Goth from the movie Pearl, but that's a separate but equal conversation. This is a whole new situation where the first two movies were absolutely both horror, but definitely both subcategories, subspecies within horror, different films, different moods, different vibes, different audience appeal. This looks like this is a thriller. We're in Los Angeles. Maxine Minx is poised to go from adult film star to real life conventional dramatic movie star. And what is she? She's a star. That's what we've known all along. We know it about Mia. We know it about Maxine. Halsey posted a first look image of this movie back in last May on her Instagram. This has been kicking around for some time. We finally have some footage. Maxine is in LA. She's ready for stardom, but somebody from her past, and boy, do we know a little bit about her past, somebody from her past will not let the prior times lie. They will not lay the past to rest. And so she must answer for the sins, the crimes, the self-defense of things that have come before the movie Maxine, perhaps the events of Pearl. And this cast is crazy stacked. We've got Kevin Bacon. We've got Bobby Cannavale. Obviously Mia. We've got Halsey. We have got Lily Collins in there too. That's cool. And we have all 6'3" of Elizabeth Debicki as a Hollywood studio type in Maxine. And it looks like there's guns, there's stalking through the night, there's the Night Stalker. This is set against the backdrop of the Night Stalker in Los Angeles. It's a thriller. This doesn't look like a body count movie in a slasher sense. This looks like maybe a body count movie in just a crime sense. Are we getting an LA porn Hollywood crime thriller from the tag team of Ty West and Mia Goth? I don't know. I hope so. I can't wait. I'm on the edge of my seat. I can't wait to see the poster. Whatever this poster is going to be, I cannot wait to see it and add it to my Maxine trilogy collection of one sheets. I'm over the moon, and that is, I could do this for an hour, so we'll leave it at that. We'll leave it at that and say that's our show. Look forward to celebrating Independence Day with all of you and Maxine. And you can follow us on Instagram and Twitter at FeelingScenePod, or send us an email at feelingscene@MaximumFun.org. If you want to follow me, I'm Jorcrew on Twitter. Our theme music is by Andrew Epen. This show is produced by Marissa Flaxbart. Our senior producers are Kevin Ferguson and Laura Swisher, and this is a production of Maximum Fun.
Maximum Fun,
a worker-owned network
of artist-owned shows,
supported directly by you.